Unfortunately, I think that if you are educated in America, I went to Yale, and so I know a lot of these Ivy League people.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we've been indoctrinated to believe certain values,
Yes.
and these values are not questionable. So for example, there was a court case that went to the Supreme Court about affirmative action at the University of Michigan. And affirmative action is clearly against American values, against the idea of American meritocracy, right? But the Supreme Court said that affirmative action was good because diversity is an inherent good, okay? And it's interesting because if you go to a place like Yale or Harvard or any of these Ivy League schools, there's actually very little diversity. I'm talking about intellectual diversity.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like there's different skin color, but if you actually look at the ideas that they engage with in the classroom, it's a very conformist setting. So it's one of these great ironies where affirmative action is supposed to bring diversity to the classroom. But if you go to any classroom in an elite setting, it's extremely conformist. You're not allowed to bring up these issues about, population replacement, immigration, because then you'd be called a racist. And that's the worst thing to be called, right? You're better off being called a pedophile. Right? Yes. Pedophiles have more rights now than racists. So unfortunately, it's not just what's happening in current events. It's also what's happening in the classroom and in the popular culture where people are not even allowed to ask questions that are like blindly obvious if you just walk the streets of any, Western city. If you're not in the West and if you're not subjected to this brainwashing, indoctrination that they feed you in the schools, it's obvious. Again, it's blindly obvious to anyone if you just walk the streets of any major city in the West. So there's a joke in China, and so Chinese don't actually like to go to Canada for tourism, and someone asked, why doesn't anyone recommend Chinese going to Canada? And the response was, well, would you recommend someone going to India? Right? So it's a bit racist. It's very racist. Okay. But it's obvious to people.